Orders she won't obey. Previous episodes are available on playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 2. Chapter 12. Watch and learn. If you feel for this wire, it will feel about 3 mm thicker than the others. Pull it down and expose the copper inside. Then feel to the left, there's one wire set aside from the others. Just put them together, twist them up, and the engine roared to life, and Jake winked at me in a fun way. Voila, he said as he stepped on the gas and the car started to move. My smile got bigger and bigger until it covered my whole face. He drove out of the boot camp through 2 big metal gates at the back entrance, and we drove down the country roads at a normal speed. I messed with the radio to find a good station at this hour. This car would sell for a lot of money, Jake said with a smirk. Jake, we're not selling his car. We need it to get back. I stopped him right away. I looked through his driving license in the glove compartment. Mason Quinn. He's 22, I said to myself. He was just 2 years older than me. There were a lot of papers on the table, and I looked down at them out of curiosity. They drug test him at random times, and of course he passed all of them. I said again as I looked over the negative drug sheets. Jake told me, they test us all for drugs at random. That's good to know. What's this? I took out a small black velvet box from the back and opened it. The prettiest ring looked back at me. It had small diamonds around the edge and a bigger round cut diamond in the middle. It shone even when it was dark. Wow, I said softly. I took it out of the box and put it on my finger, admiring how it looked on my hand. I said to Jake, who was looking at me out of the corner of his eye, it fits perfectly. He's engaged? Jake asked in disbelief. I could see how shocked he was. It was hard to see Mason as a real person who had a life outside of giving orders and punishing people. He's not engaged, the ring would be on someone's finger instead of in his car. But maybe he plans to ask her to marry him. The thought made me sad for some reason, but I pushed it out of my mind. Maybe she turned him down, and that's why he's so cold. He was so hurt that he couldn't be around people. I looked at my finger again. It was a really pretty ring. It looked like it cost a lot of money and shone like it was brand new. He obviously loved the person he bought this ring for very much. Let me drive, I told Jake. He smiled at me, and his baby face made me think of a bad schoolboy all the time. It was hard not to love his bubbly, fun personality. He had dark hair, gray eyes, and a smile that never left his face. He stopped the car and we switched sides. I loved how the ring looked on my finger, so I gripped the steering wheel and hit the gas. The car sped away, and I pressed harder, sending it to the floor. It sounded like a freaking race car. I could feel something pulling me back against the leather chair because we were going so fast. The wind hit our faces and blew my hair all over the place. I couldn't help but laugh because I was so scared, excited, and full of adrenaline. Jake laughed and threw his hands up in the air like he was on a roller coaster. "You're crazy, Riley," he said. I pushed down harder on the gas pedal and saw the small arrow dial of speed reach the end of the meter. The shape of the Lamborghini made us feel like we were going faster than we probably were. I slowed down and brought the car back to normal speeds when we turned onto the narrower roads. I parked next to an empty field and got out of the car. I opened his trunk to see what was inside. Jake was curious and followed me outside. "What is in there?" he asked. "Nothing, just an extra uniform and boots." I moved his clothes out of the way and grabbed a black briefcase, which I opened by pushing the clasp. I said, "A gun," in shock. Jake walked quickly over to me and looked in the back of his car. A small black gun was in a small briefcase with foam padding around it. He looked at me like he didn't understand, but then I closed the lid and put everything back where I found it. "Before we go back to boot camp, let's find a fast food place," he said, and honestly, it was the best thing I had heard since I got here. This time he drove and cut through the roads like a blunt knife through butter. The car was a dream come true, but the person who owned it was a total nightmare. We ended up at a McDonald's drive-thru on the side of the road. It was on the outskirts of town and was made for truckers and travelers passing through. I was practically bouncing in my seat after eating slop for the last few days. "Riley, what do you want?" "A Big Mac and a Coke." "Large fries, a box of cheddar cheese bites to share, and a Coke with no ice." "Don't forget the sweet and sour sauce," I said into the intercom. "No burger." He looked at me like I was crazy. I told him, "I don't do burgers." "You are strange," he said with a laugh. We ate our food and then threw all the wrappers in the back seat of his car. Then we drove back and quietly put his car back where it was without getting caught. He looked at the trash on the back seat. "Should we throw it away?" Jake asked, and I smiled wickedly. "Don't do it. He'll be confused and angry." We both laughed and then got out of the car and went back to our own sleeping quarters without being seen. Maddie woke me up and said, "The dogs are here." I sat up and looked around the room. The girls were getting ready in a hurry. The shed was still dark, and the sun hadn't even come up yet. I rubbed the sleepiness away from my face and said, "What?" A sparkle caught my eye right away on my hand. I took the ring off my finger and put it in my bra. How could I have forgotten to take the ring off? "The dogs, get dressed." Maddie threw my clothes at me, and I got dressed very slowly. My roommates and I didn't have to wait long before we were made to stand outside our shed in a queue. We weren't the only ones standing at attention outside, every shed on the boot camp was doing it. I kept my eyes on the road ahead and breathed in the cold night air as a group of guys with flashlights and sniffer dogs came up to me. A man stood in front of Sierra and waved an electric wand over her body from her head to her toes. She didn't move and stared straight ahead. "Clear," he said to Mason, who looked tired and was standing on the sidelines. The guard did the same thing to Raven. "Clear," he yelled again before coming to me. He waved his wand over my body, but when it got, a small red light came on and the wand made a loud noise. The guard turned to Mason and asked, "Crap?" Mason said, "It's okay, I know what those are," without thinking. Everyone, including me, looked at him, and he looked scared when he realized what was going on. "Eyes out front, soldiers," he said, and everyone instantly snapped back to attention. "Go on," he told the guard without needing to explain why. I took shallow breaths and knew that I was saved from going to jail. But then the dogs showed up, pulling men behind them. "Hey buddy! You're so cute, look at your little nose. I bent down and rubbed the German Shepherd's head. He was a little too into sniffing me, but I think he mostly liked how playful my hands were and how happy they made him. Mason yelled, "Rivers! Stand up straight right away and don't talk to the sniffer dogs." I stood up straight and backed up. The dog put his 2 paws on my thighs and tried to jump again. The guards exchanged glances. "Get moving," Mason said, and they did. They obviously didn't find anything after checking every boot camp recruit for hours. I sat in the cafeteria with a bowl of slop in front of me. Jake sat down at my table and leaned in close. He whispered, "You didn't put the ring back. What happened? Did they catch you?" I looked up at Mason, who was standing to the side of the cafeteria and looking around the whole room. There was something off about him today, his whiskey-colored eyes looked sad. But as always, he stood up straight and strict, with a deep frown on his forehead and a scary aura around him. "No," and when the metal detector beeped, I thought it was me. I said. He opened his eyes wide and then a smile pulled at one side of his mouth. "And they didn't search you?" he asked. "No," I said quickly. "How?" His eyebrows went up, and he was completely focused on what I was saying. "They just do." I didn't have a better answer without telling the whole shower story. I looked back at Mason, and he was looking right at us. My heart raced. He looked sad, but he was also wearing a mask that kept his true feelings from showing. "Can I see?" Jake asked, and he was able to get my attention away from Mason. My eyebrows knitted together in confusion until I figured out what he was asking. "No," I laughed and pushed his hand away. He said with a smile, "You're no fun." I looked at Mason again in secret, and he was still looking our way. His eyes were different today, which was the only sign of how he was feeling. I had never really looked at them before. I had only seen him for the tough exterior he always wears. But at this moment, something about him seemed softer, almost weak. The professional man is gone, and in his place is a person who is suffering inside and needs to come together. I asked Jake, "Do you think the ring might have meant something to you?" He shoved a spoonful of slop into his mouth and swallowed it without chewing. "It's just a ring, Riley." "I don't think he'd want to remember that if his girl said no," Jake said in a calm voice. "But what if he was married or engaged and his girlfriend died or something?" I bit down on my lower lip and pulled it between my teeth as I thought of ideas. "I guess they did make a big deal out of it this morning." "It's either very valuable or impossible to replace," Jake said. I made up my mind, I have to give it back. He dropped his spoon, and some food that couldn't be eaten spread out across the table. "Don't you dare!" he yelled, not caring that his voice was loud. Jake said, "They'll send you away. He'll kill you. He has a gun in his car. I have to do the right thing." "I think he is sad," I said with a sigh. "Riley, he doesn't get sad. He doesn't have feelings. He's not a person." Jake looked worried and slowly turned his head towards Mason, then quickly turned it back to me, eyes wide. "Shit, he's staring right at us. Do you think he knows?" I asked. "How could he know?" in a calm voice. He let out a sigh. "Okay, you want to give it back. Do it in secret." Go to his block when you know he's not there and leave it somewhere where he can see it. He lives on Block A, which is the third one along. I trust you can pick locks. I nodded. That was a good idea. It shouldn't be too hard to sneak into his room, and that will stop me from getting any more punishments or doing his pointless punishments. I've made up my mind to leave now that he's in here. Jake looked at the food I hadn't eaten yet. He asked with a sly smile, "Can I eat that?" I stood up and pushed the plastic plate towards him. He told me, "Don't get caught." I took one look at Mason, whose eyes seemed to follow me as I left the cafeteria and went back to my room to get the ring from my trunk. Rivers. I stopped in my tracks and stood still for one of the privates. "There's a phone call for you." I rolled my eyes but went to the office anyway. I wasted 15 minutes of my valuable time telling my uncle about everything that happened at boot camp and talking about the legal issues in my CO defendant's case. I was finally able to finish my mission after that. Sierra asked me, "Where are you going so fast?" "I have to do something, and I'm running out of time." I searched through my trunk for the loose piece of metal I had thrown in there with some clothes. "Oh my God, is that what they were looking for?" "Whose ring is that?" she said as she came closer and took it from my hand to look at it. I told her, "SHH. Don't tell anyone." I didn't answer her questions. Of course they sent out a whole search party. "The diamonds on this are amazing. The person who owns this ring must really like diamonds," she said. I put the ring back on and slipped it into my bra. His annoying words came back to me. "You're not a diamond in the rough." "You don't say," I said quietly as I stood up before my own mind could make him feel bad enough to not want to give his ring back. I told Sierra, "I'll be back soon," and then I left the shed and ducked through the hedge to get to the staff quarters. I looked at the lock on his shed and kept an eye out for anyone who might be walking by. It was dangerous because it was the first time I had been on this side of the hedge during the day. I pulled on the handle without thinking and saw that the door was unlocked. I pushed it open, stepped inside quickly, and closed the door behind me. Mason's voice yelled from behind me, "What?" I closed my eyes and let the regret wash over me. Then I slowly turned to look at him. He was sitting on a brown leather couch in front of a TV with a remote control in his hand. I blinked at what I saw. It was strange because it looked so normal. He got up and walked to the window. He looked out and turned his head to the left and right to see all the ways his street went. Then he took my hand and led me to the center of the room. His living space was small, but it looked like a palace compared to mine. There was a double bed against the back wall. It had a pine frame and a powder blue buffalo checked duvet on it. To the left, he had 3 kitchen units that held a sink, a microwave, a coffee maker and a small fridge and freezer. In front of an old box TV was a 3-person couch. "You were in the cafeteria," I weakly pointed out. His eyebrows shot up, and his face lit up with rage. "I haven't been in the cafeteria for half an hour. But you obviously wanted my spot empty, so what are you doing here, Riley?" He crossed his arms over his strong chest and squinted at me. I looked down at his boots and straightened up. "Sorry, Lieutenant Sir. I messed up," I said with confidence, just how he likes it. "This is a huge mistake. Can I speak to the lieutenant?" He laughed. His laughter echoed off the wooden walls of his home. They moved through my body, wrapping around me like a hug and squeezing me tightly. He then remembered who he was and stopped laughing, bringing back all of his professionalism. I kept my head down and stood up straight like a soldier. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this. I can only avoid being sent away so many times. This time, I was definitely gone. Why are you acting strange? He asked. I looked up at him. His eyes were the same color as the perfect snack, with hints of caramel and cocoa. I wondered if he was just as sweet under the tough exterior he wears. Isn't that how you like to be called? I asked in a confused way. No, he said in a sharp voice. Yes, he said in response. Since when have you ever followed the rules? He finally said. I promised you I would because you didn't tell your precious commander about me, I said in a low voice. He slowly looked around his living space, a smile on his face. And how are you keeping that promise so far? He asked, a smile almost hidden on his lips. I looked down again, feeling a little worse for breaking my promise to him. I promised to be the best soldier, but I took his car for a joyride, stole his diamond ring, and broke into his private space. I could feel his strong fingers gently grip my chin, and he slowly pushed my face up to look at him. I felt butterflies in my stomach, and my lips parted slightly. I had never felt that way before. What are you doing here, Riley? He asked in a serious voice that made my head hurt. I slowly closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them again. Putting my hand down my t-shirt and grabbing the ring. Then I held my arm out and saw the diamonds sparkle on my hand. Mason looked at my hand and took a few steps back. Then he blinked and blinked again, as if he was trying to understand what his eyes were telling him. I didn't mean to take it. I tried it on and then forgot to take it off. It was only this morning. Shut up, he yelled, and my whole body jumped in fear. There was no sign of his rare kindness from a moment ago. The lieutenant's voice was back, strong and sharp. He turned away from me and walked a few steps with his hands on his head. He was very angry. Do you have a personal grudge against me? He asked, turning back to face me with his thick brow furrowing. He looked mad, and maybe even a little hurt. No, what? I said in my defense. Is it because I treat you differently? He ran his fingers through his short hair and walked around the room again. You do? I said in a low voice. You take advantage of that, he said, and I frowned. I'm so dumb, he said quietly to himself. He stopped walking around and angrily took the ring from my hand. He stood up straight and took a deep, calming breath. Rivers, straighten up and look down. He yelled, and the force of his words sent thick gusts of air hitting my face. I did what he told me to do. He looked at my body. He told me to tuck in your shirt. Yes, sir, I said, tucking my shirt into my waist. He looked at me like he was sick of me. To him, I was just a dirty criminal. You stole my car. Who helped you? He said through clenched teeth. Nobody, I said quickly. I did it by myself, Lieutenant Sir. I remembered my manners. He asked with a lot of anger. Jake didn't have anything to do with this. I could tell from the way he spoke that he already knew Jake was involved. I would never say it out loud. I swear it was just me, Lieutenant. I said without thinking. He said in a cold voice, I need you gone. Okay, I can leave. I turned towards the door, really grateful that he was letting me get away from him. No, he said, stopping me. I need you gone. He said it again, this time in a more serious tone, and I knew he meant he needed me to leave the boot camp. I asked him quietly, are you going to tell the commander? His eyes looked sad and full of regret. Do you leave me much choice, Riley? You always look at me, and you talk back. A few lines of frown appeared on my forehead. I wanted to roll my eyes at his scolding, but for some reason I didn't. I looked down instead. When I punish you, I feel bad, but I don't know why. My head shot up right away, and my eyebrows went up. You left the boot camp and got 7 other girls to go with you. I couldn't help but cover for you. You disrespect me on the pitch all the time, but I let it slide. You jumped in my shower. Do you know how off limits that is? Do you know what I would lose if the commander found out? My mouth fell open and I shook my head very slowly. I almost gave up everything I had been working so hard to suppress. You know the level of control, the years of training it's taken for my body to not be affected by that shit? Jesus! Then you come along in one moment I almost break it all. I nearly lost control. I blinked at him, not fully understanding what he was talking about, but my hunch was that it had something to do with his vow. I cover for you again, stupidly, and how do you repay me? By stealing my car and taking my ring. Jesus, if you were anyone else, you would have been gone by now and never thought of again. I'm sorry, Mason. I reached for his arm, but he pulled away. I'm giving you 48 hours to say goodbye while I make the arrangements and talk to the judge. I'm sorry, Riley, but I have to stay professional, and it seems that I can't do that around you. You can't be a diamond among the rocks. I get it, I said sadly. I turned back towards the door, but my fingers were still wrapped around the handle. I told him, she's lucky, your fiancé, and pointed to the ring he was holding. He raised his eyebrows and looked at the ring. It's not. He stopped, not sure if he wanted to tell me what was on his mind. It was my mom's ring. She died when I was young. I'm sorry, I said quietly before leaving his house. I chose not to tell anyone I was leaving and instead went back, lay down in bed, and fell asleep until morning. I took a cold shower because I didn't want to take a warm one in the staff quarters again, and I ate a banana that looked pretty brown. It was actually one of the better meals on the whole boot camp campus. At exactly 500 hours, my boots were digging into the ground in the field, and Mason was checking out my uniform like he does every morning. It was strange to know that tomorrow morning would be different. I would probably be sitting in the back of my uncle's police car, handcuffed, and scared out of my mind about what was going to happen next. I was being judged by the one thing that had gotten me sent away in the first place on my last day of freedom. But I couldn't be angry because he had given me many chances and I had messed up every single one of them. He made us march for half an hour, chanting to us as we walked on wet dirt and bumpy ground. I saw Jake looking at me from across the street and wanted to go tell him what happened with the ring, but he was on a different queue because he was taller than me. Mason started yelling orders for the obstacle course pretty quickly. I climbed over a 10-foot fence using my arm strength and then dropped to the other side. I ran, dodging used car tires, crawled under barbed wire that tore at my clothes, rolled around in wet mud like a pig, and climbed up a single thread of rope, ringing a bell at the top before jumping back down. I was cold and sweaty, my lungs were gasping for air, and the ropes had burned my palms. Mason yelled for everyone to run 40 laps of the track just when I thought it was over. "What's going on?" Jake ran slower on purpose so he could jog next to me. "I'm being sent away tomorrow morning," I told him with a sad tone. "Shit, Riley, that sucks," he said in a low voice. "Jake, Rivers, you both just got 10 more laps," Mason yelled. I rolled my eyes, wiping the sweat off my forehead but continued running. "Gibbons, 10 extra laps. Pick up the pace, Michaels," Mason shouted again. "He's in a bad mood today," Amber whispered to Jake and I. "Seems pretty normal to me," Jake replied. Amber joked, "He needs a bed." We all started laughing, and Mason ran over to us. "Drop and give me 20. We fell to the ground, having trouble doing the push-ups after the obstacle course and running on the track. The boot camp today was terrible. "So guys, I'm leaving tomorrow. I broke too many rules, and this is my last night of freedom." Everyone in my dorm stopped what they were doing and looked at me. "Riley, you can't go," Raven said. "I don't really have a choice." I laughed, even though it wasn't funny at all. "Well, if this is your last night of freedom, we should go out and celebrate it by getting really drunk and forgetting everything." I could feel my eyes lighting up with mischief. "Let's do it," I said. I had 6 beers and 4 shots of vodka. The little pub down the road was just as busy as it had been the last time. Since it was the only pub for miles around, it seemed like it would never go out of business. "I'll really miss this place," I said to Maddie, who was sleeping next to me at the table. Sierra laughed and said, "You've been here twice." "No, Sierra, shh. I put my index finger over her lips, and she turned her eyes inward to look at it. Why did he have to go to his stupid commander? I hate him for sending me away. "You did take his ring," Sierra said behind my finger. "Shh. We don't want to hear the facts. We were friends." I took another shot. Amber and Sierra both laughed. "Nobody is friends with the lieutenant," Amber said quietly. I shrugged. "Maybe we weren't, but we could have been. If he hadn't been so scared of breaking the rules." They all laughed again. "Yeah, we could all be friends with him, in a different life," Sierra said. "I know what," I said, and then I burped. "No isn't going to work for me. Mason is going to be my friend." "Hey, Mason," they yelled with joy and laughter. "No. More than friends." I slurred and burped again. "I am going to." I held my finger up in the air. "Seduce him." I put my finger down on the table. The girls started to laugh. "I'm only behind this plan because I know you're leaving tomorrow anyway, so what harm can come of it?" Amber said in a funny voice. I agreed and nodded. "Let's go." I stood up and swayed back and forth on the spot. Sierra put her hands on my body to keep me steady. But as soon as I got my balance, I left the bar. I was a girl on a mission and couldn't be stopped. I could hear the girls behind me talking and laughing, but I ran ahead down the dark dirt road back to boot camp. I pulled on the door handle to get into our shed, and everyone else followed me in a few seconds later. As Raven lay on the bed, she asked me, "Riley, you can't be serious. What are you going to do?" "I am going to take off all your clothes." Raven looked at my body and nodded. "Girl, you've already done that," she said with a laugh. I sat down on the bed, but I almost missed it and fell to the floor. Sierra pushed my shoulder to get me to sit up straight. I put on my combat boots and tied the laces. I would have liked heels better, but I don't have any, so combat boots will have to do. For the state I was in, I was able to say something that made sense. I hit my two booted feet together. "Are they shiny enough?" I asked. Amber teased, "I don't think he's going to look at your shoes." I stood up straight again, or at least I thought I did. The whole room wasn't, though, it swayed and spun. "I'll walk in there and tell him he's earned 20 laps around my body." Everyone laughed, even me. "Riley, go to bed," Amber said. "No, I'm going to Mason. I'll give you all a full report on his genitals tomorrow." I nodded sternly and walked towards the door. Sierra yelled, "Wait!" She took a camouflage jacket off a hook on the wall and gave it to me. "You can take it off in front of him for a big reveal. You're going to need something to keep you warm when they send you away in the middle of the night." I put on the jacket, which came down to just below, and tied it closed in front. "We love you, Riley, and we're going to miss you. Stay safe in prison." They shouted their goodbyes, and I opened the door, letting the cold night air hit my almost bare body. I slowly made my way through the hedge, not caring too much about sneaking around the staff quarters. Then I found his small living space. I grabbed the door handle and pulled it open with all my strength. I walked in and saw that the whole room was dimly lit. I saw a few candles here and there. He was sitting on his couch watching TV and wearing only sweatpants. His chest tattoo was clearly visible. I held back a smile. "Riley," what he started to say, but I found the edges of my jacket and very slowly pulled it open and dropped it to the floor. He looked at my whole body really slowly, and his eyes sparkled. I could hear him gulp from across the room, and he tightened his grip on the remote. His eyes glazed over with desire, and I walked over to him, got his full attention, and sat on his lap with my legs spread out on either side of his. He put his hands on my waist, and his dark brown eyes moved between my lips and mine. I put my mouth on his, and he hesitated for a moment before fully committing. He tasted like everything that was off limits, which made it even sweeter. In the candlelight, his hand moved up my back, gripping my skin. I thought his kiss would be demanding, but he let me take the lead. It was almost like he wasn't sure if he wanted to go through with it, but he couldn't help himself. He pulled away and looked at me with scared eyes. "You're drunk," he said in a flat voice. I put my index finger on his lips. They felt warmer and fuller than Sierra's had earlier. He raised his eyebrows and gave me his best scary look, but it didn't work. He was at his most vulnerable right now, and no amount of fake emotions was going to make me forget that. God, Riley. He picked me up and put me down on the sofa, then stood up and looked through his drawers. Why do you put me in these situations? You drive me crazy. He threw me one of his t-shirts, and I just looked down at it with disapproval. You're sending me away tomorrow. Can't we just have tonight? I looked at the bed, and he followed my gaze. No, you're drunk. Put on the t-shirt. That's an order. I sighed and tightened my lips. So if I wasn't drunk, you would like me? I asked, not following his order. He simply said, no. I got up, threw the t-shirt away, and walked over to him. I ran my hand down his chest and over his tattoo. It was an eagle flying with its wings spread wide, and it looked really cool. I could feel his heart rate go up and his chest move faster under my hand. Why? I whispered, and the heat between us grew. He swallowed and looked straight ahead, not looking at me and keeping his eyes straight as if he were talking to someone of higher rank. Riley, please don't do this. I can't. He whispered, and the desire in his voice was louder than most of his orders. Because of the vow. I laughed and said no to the silly idea. Because you're a recruit and I'm the lieutenant, it's wrong. I can't abuse my position of power. Because you promised not to. Whoever told you that? It's not true unless you hear it from me. He stepped back and opened the fridge. The bright light shattered the illusion of calm that had been in the room. He took a sip from a bottle of water. I can't get involved with the recruits. I never have and I never will. I'm flattered, you're beautiful, but I can't go there. He took another sip. I took the t-shirt and put it on, then lay down on his couch. I looked at the TV, which was now off, and thought about when he had done that. You watch TV? He laughed at my random question. Of course I do. He came over to me and sat down on the arm of the couch, probably to keep his distance from me. I really wanted to know, so I asked, what else do you do that normal people do? Do you eat? He laughed again. I eat. I shower. I shit. I shave. His whole face looked softer. I had never noticed how tense his shoulders were before, but now they were relaxed. Do you feel things that other people do? I asked, and he frowned. Are you sad? Yes. Are you jealous? Yes. Do you get turned on? Pause. Yes. You hesitated, I said with a smile. I don't do anything about it when it happens, but I've learned to keep it under control. What God, why am I telling you this? You need to leave. I laughed so hard that my stomach hurt. He just looked at me with a blank look. I got up and walked to his bed, and he watched me carefully the whole time. There wasn't a single wrinkle in his sheets, and each edge was tucked in tightly. I asked, is it okay if I take a short nap, as I kicked off my boots and pulled back the duvet. He walked back and forth in the room. He said, no, it's not, but I had already gotten under the covers. His bed was a lot more comfortable than mine. He had a mattress, but I only had springs. He had cotton sheets, but I had scratchy fiber. His bed smelled like him, fresh. I moved around to make my body comfortable and closed my eyes. Riley, I said no. He fought back and tried to take the blankets from me. Riley, you can't be here. You have to go back. He yelled again, and I kept my eyes shut tight. Are you listening to me? The longer I kept my eyes closed, the more distant his voice became. Rivers. It was just a distant whisper now. My mouth was so dry it felt like cardboard or sandpaper. I squirmed down in the mattress. I haven't slept this well in weeks. I slowly opened my eyes so that they could get used to the dark around me. Then I saw his face. The angry look on his face. Two eyes that looked like wet dirt blinked at me. His nostrils flared and his jaw clenched. It was really creepy. He pulled a chair over, put it at the foot of the bed, and sat there staring at me while I slept. Hi. I said quietly, and my throat sounded very rough. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything. I thought for a second that I was dreaming. I whispered again, "What are you doing?" "Thinking about killing you in a lot of different ways and at a lot of different times," he said calmly. "Come to bed." I reached out from under the covers and clasped my hands a couple of times. He looked at my hands and then his forehead furrowed. "Riley, you shouldn't even be here. You need to go back to your room, and I'm not getting in bed with you." He leaned back in his chair and ran his finger over his stubble. "Mason, it's the middle of the night. Please stop being so standoffish and get in bed. The wake-up siren will be playing soon, and you need some sleep. How else are you going to have the energy to beat us on the pitch?" I pulled back the covers, and he looked at the empty space next to me. I waited for him to decide what to do. "In bed, with you?" he asked, sounding unsure. I nodded. "I promised, you won't even know I'm here." He stood up from the chair and walked to the bed after thinking about it for a few more seconds. Just as he was about to get in, I threw the blanket back down in front of him. He stopped moving. "Could you please get me some water first?" I asked with a smile. "Ugh, Riley," he groaned. I tried not to smile, but the good lieutenant did what I said and got his water bottle from earlier. I took a small sip and then lay back down next to him under the covers. I shouldn't be doing this. I snuggled up to him and held my hand over his strong chest. I could only hear him sighing loudly before I fell back asleep. My eyes flew open when an alarm clock went off. I yelled at Mason, who was lying next to me and staring at me, "What?" I quickly backed away, and a slow smile spread across his face. "You look so innocent when you sleep." "It's strange," he said. "Who stares at someone while they sleep?" I sat up in his bed, my long dark hair falling loosely around my shoulders and his big t-shirt hugging my body. "You know you talk in your sleep." He got out of bed and grabbed onto one of the wooden beams that hung from the roof. He started to pull his body weight up and down, and I couldn't look away. I bit down on the soft flesh of my lips to keep my feelings in check as I watched his torso muscles tighten and relax. I mumbled, "What did I say?" as if I were talking to his ABS. He got off the bar and I could see his eyes again. "We need to get you out of here before anyone finds out you spent the night." He didn't answer my question. He made himself a cup of coffee while I rubbed my eyes. "I'll have one of those," I said, but he shook his head and only filled one cup. Or not, I said under my breath as he drank his black coffee with no sugar. Do you remember what happened last night? He lay down on the bed and put his head on his elbow. I looked around the room with my eyes. I was wearing one of his old blue t-shirts. I could see my boots next to the bed, but I couldn't see any other clothes. I went to the bar and drank too much. I started to explain what had happened that night. You went back to the bar, he yelled, sitting up and holding the cup tighter. I didn't pay any attention to his outburst. We were making fun of you because you were such a tough guy and needed to get laid. So I said I'd take one for the team. I guess that's what happened here. I pointed to what I was wearing. Wait, he said in a threatening way. Are you saying that someone knows you came here last night? He stood up, moving slowly and carefully. I lay down in his bed. Just my roommates, I said without thinking. His eyes got bigger, and he whistled in a strange way through his lips. Then came some fast breathing. Don't worry, I'm not going to see any of them again. You're sending me away this morning, so they'll just think I left last night. He looked at me with worry in his beautiful eyes and his jaw was tight. Riley, he said with a sigh, I never asked for you to be moved. My mouth dropped open and I sat there in silence. You didn't. He shook his head and sat on the end of the bed, taking it all in. I crawled up to him and put one hand on each of his cheeks. Hey, it's okay. Stop worrying. His amber eyes blinked back at me with concern, and I leaned down to kiss his soft lips. He pulled away from me, saying no. Riley, he said with a grunt. I took a chance and smiled. So you can do last night but not kiss me this morning? I said in a sarcastic tone. Nothing happened last night, he said, standing up and moving away. He went to the wash basin and began to brush his teeth. Can I use your toothbrush? He said, and then he turned to me with a look that said, Are you serious? No, he said firmly. He looked in his drawer and found some sweatpants, which he threw at me. Here's what we're going to do. He looked at the watch on his wrist and then back at me. You're going to go pretend to sleep behind the cafeteria, and I'll send one of the generals to find you and bring you to the boot camp field. You'll tell your roommates you never even made it to my quarters. I'll have to punish you to make it look real. I sucked in my lips and breathed through my nose. I said, or we could just say nothing happened. You don't know what he's like, Mason said quietly as he shook his head. Who? My whole face twisted in confusion. My father, he said in a flat voice. Who is your father? I didn't get it at all. He raised his eyebrows and looked at me like I should already know the answer. The boss. At that moment, everything made sense. The likeness was scary. They were both tall, had sharp features, brown eyes, and bodies that were very muscular. They both looked powerful. Mason was just like his dad when he was younger. Is all of this just a way to impress your dad, or do you really care about your job? His face got hard and his shoulders straightened. He quickly raised his guard and pulled all of his feelings out of his eyes. He coughed. Stand to attention, soldier, he yelled. I stared at him with no expression. Now Rivers. I didn't want to, but I got out of bed and stood up straight, putting my hand on my head. the t-shirt rises up, he said, his voice shaking and his face turning red. I let go of my arm and pulled on his big sweatpants. I changed the subject and asked, behind the cafeteria. He nodded. Be quick sending the general. I tucked the bottom of his trousers into my boots and left, avoiding the many staff members who were walking around the quarters this morning. I was lucky enough to get behind the cafeteria without anyone seeing me. I lay down in the fetal position and closed my eyes. Rivers. Wake up. I jumped up and said something that didn't make sense. Have you been drinking? He's really going to have your tits for this, the general said in a low voice. No, I passed out. I think I'm sick. I need medical. The general looked down at what I was wearing and stayed quiet for a few seconds while he took it all in. Did you sleepwalk? He asked. I can't remember. I'm so confused. I think I'm going to pass out again. I sucked in my lips so I wouldn't smile at how stupid he was. He used his walkie-talkie. This is Yellow Swan calling for Red Dog. Mason answered right away. This is Red Dog answering Yellow Swan's call. What's up, General? My desire to smile only grew stronger. Sir, I've found Rivers. She looks a little weak. She was passed out and is asking for medical help. May I be so bold as to say that she doesn't seem to be in good spirits at all? She's fine, General. Take her to the field. I grumbled and fell to the floor again, closing my eyes. Sir, she has passed out again. She needs medical help. Mason actually sighed into his walkie-talkie. I could picture how angry he would look. I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. Okay, General. Send her back to bed and call a doctor to check on her. Let all the recruits know that I will be stopping by their quarters at 1700 hours. Over and out. The dumb general helped me back to my dorm and put me in bed. It felt even worse now that I had slept in Mason's bed, which was a luxury. A nurse came in a little while later and checked my temperature, blood pressure, and pulse rate. Everything was fine. I'll tell the lieutenant that your body crashed because you worked too hard. She smiled sweetly at me. I know he'll love that, I said in a croaky voice. Get some sleep. You'll be fine by tomorrow. I closed my eyes and enjoyed the rare quietness of my room. I also felt smart for coming up with this clever plan. Rivers. He yelled right next to my ear, making my heart drop out of my mouth. I yelled in a high-pitched voice, "You," while holding my heart. He began to laugh. I got out of bed and looked around. The sun was setting behind the thin glass windows, and my room was empty. That's not how you should talk to your lieutenant, he said quietly. He pulled over a chair and sat down next to my bed, putting his feet up on the frame. How was your day of nursing your hangover all by yourself in bed? I yawned and stretched. Yes, I said with a proud smile. That was smart, you got away with everything. You do know you're going to really make up for that tomorrow. My smile faded, but his smile grew. I said, do you like hurting people? It's my favorite thing to do, he said with a laugh. When the door opened, you could hear muffled laughter and voices coming through the wooden walls. Mason jumped up from his chair right away and stood up straight. He acted like he was doing something wrong and was going to get caught. Sierra, Raven, and Amber walked in, saw Mason, and then stopped talking. They stood at attention. At ease, soldiers, Mason said in a stern voice. His voice was back to being authoritative, his posture was tense, and his face was completely straight. It looks like Rivers is feeling a little sick. Make sure she doesn't cause any more trouble tonight. He saluted the room and left. The girls calmed down right away and ran over to my bed. They asked me a lot of questions, like, "Oh my God! What happened? Why are you still here?" I shrugged. I woke up this morning at the back of the cafeteria and told the general I fainted. He gave me a day in bed to get better. I hoped they couldn't see through my lie. Sierra said, "You lucky. The lieutenant went so hard on us today. It's like he knew we were all hungover or something." I picked up a bottle of water from the floor and started drinking it to keep my lips busy. I was so happy that I had a break from the awful boot camp. Amber said, "Let's toast some s'mores tonight. They're giving some away in the cafeteria right now, and the guys are loading up on them to give away later." "Sounds nice," I said quietly as I got up and grabbed my shower caddy. "I'm going to take a shower," I said. The girls laughed and shook their heads. It took me about an hour to wash and blow dry my hair. It had become my safe place here. It made me realize how much I've missed taking hot showers in the last few days. I folded Mason's clothes neatly and put them in a bag. Then I opened the door to make sure no one was around before I walked through the staff quarters and stopped at Mason's shed on the way back to my own. "Wow!" he yelled when I opened the door and walked in. "Sorry, I can't just knock and wait for you to answer," I said, looking away from him. I'm sure he was still getting dressed, but at a faster pace. "Your hair looks freshly washed and blow-dried." The way he said it made it sound like he was accusing her of something. "Do you want me to answer that or just say thank you?" He shook his head and rolled his eyes. He cleverly decided to say, "Don't answer that." I gave him the plastic bag, and he took it and looked inside with interest. "Your clothes," I awkwardly pointed out. He threw the bag on the floor and sat on the end of his bed, rubbing lotion into his hands. I held back a smile at this tough, professional, man's man who was proud of how he looked. "You know you're going to get caught sneaking around here, there, and everywhere." I put my hands up to protect myself. "I promise this is the last time I'll come here." He straightened his lips into a thin line and nodded. I was about to leave when I looked back at him. "Tonight the recruits are making s'mores around a campfire. Why don't you join us?" His brows knitted together and his eyes narrowed. "Riley, you can't make open fires without supervision," he said to me suddenly. "Oh." That was all I could say in response. My lips made a perfect O shape, and there was only silence after that as I realized I had ruined the camp's plans. "Then that is definitely not what we are going to do," I said, and I didn't sound like I meant it at all. I could see him trying not to smile, but his lips were twitching. "I'll keep an eye on things," he said. I suggested, "Or you could join in." "I will supervise," he said again, making his role clear. This was a big bonfire in the middle of a field made by two arsonists. I thought it was a small campfire. Mason had pulled out at least 40 generals and privates to keep an eye on things, and they all stood at attention all over the pitch. "I can't believe he said yes to this," Sierra said. I looked over at Mason, who was standing close by and looked very stiff and on guard. "How did he know?" I shrugged. "Rumors spread quickly," I said in response. "He's so freaking hot." She looked at him from head to toe and bit her lips like she was looking at a chocolate cake. I laughed. "I bet he would make you call him Lieutenant in bed, look down, and say you're a bad girl and give you all the punishments." I laughed even harder and looked at him again. He still didn't look comfortable at all. Maddie came over and licked around her more. "What are we talking about?" "How dominating the lieutenant is," I said right away. "Yes, I would love for him to bend me over." I shook my head in disbelief. "I wish he was easier to talk to," she said. "Well, have you tried talking to him?" "He's totally open to talking." They laughed at me, like my idea was the dumbest thing they'd ever heard. "No way, he's scary." "I might get extra laps just for saying hello," Sierra said under her breath. "Watch and learn, ladies." I stood up and walked to the bonfire, where I made a s'more with graham crackers, chocolate, and a marshmallow. I warmed it up by the bonfire until it was gooey and tasty, and then I walked over to Mason, feeling like my friends were watching me. Mason kept his eyes open and looked at everything that was going on. As I got closer, his body twitched a little, but he didn't move. "I made you a s'more," I said, but my voice sounded small and quiet. "I don't want it, Rivers." He said this loudly and kept his eyes on the road. "Rivers?" I asked in a low voice. He didn't move, so I held the s'more up to his nose and waved it around. He kept his eyes on the road and his body stiff. "Are you sure? It's really good." I could hear Sierra and Maddie laughing from far away. I turned to look at them and laughed too. Mason's jaw was tight with anger. "Fine, your loss," I said, and then I ate the dripping marshmallow. He only moved his eyes to look at me for a second before pointing them back out front. "I heard you," he said in a stiff voice, as if he was trying not to move his lips as he spoke. "Talking with them about me." He spoke so softly now that it sounded like a mumble. I asked, "Oh, are you mad at me for that or something?" His eyes got a little bigger, but in the end he didn't do anything. "No," he said. "But it's an odd choice of conversation." I laughed without thinking. "Mason, what you do to take up at least 90% of our conversations? They think you're hot." I licked more sticky marshmallow. He looked at me for a split second before going back to what he was doing. "And you?" I asked, my brows furrowing in confusion. I asked quietly, "What do you?" he asked again. I sucked my lips in to stop my smile from getting bigger. "No, don't answer that. That was, too much." I could have answered him right away, but now that I knew he wanted to know, I wanted to keep it from him and let him stew. "Stop bothering me, Rivers, or I'll put out this bonfire and call for lights out." He was back to his normal loud, bossy voice. "Keeping your reputation, I see," I said under my breath before walking away and joining my friends. I stood in line with the other recruits while Mason and the other privates paired up the troops based on their size and/or skill level. I was getting impatient and couldn't help but let out a few sighs here and there. People around me disappeared in pairs until I was the only one left. Rivers, Mason said, looking over his charts. God only knows why, since it was clear that I was the only one left without a partner. We seem to have an odd number of people. That's a puzzle. One of the privates said, I could partner with her, Lieutenant Sir. Mason looked at him. There's no need, Private. I guess this is a good chance for me to help her improve her skills. She has a lot of work to do. I put my lips together. Don't say anything back. Don't say anything back. Don't say anything back. I didn't miss the smile that made Mason's lips twitch. Left, right, left, left, right, left. Mason yelled, telling me to march. I stepped in queue next to him and marched straight to the lake. As soon as the privates couldn't see us anymore, I stopped marching and walked next to him. He asked in his normal voice, "Did I tell you to stop marching?" I said, "No, but I guess I need a lot of work." He laughed out loud, but it was a splutter. "Get in the raft, dummy." He pointed to a small orange boat for 2 people that was floating on the river. I wasn't very sure about it, but I stepped in and carefully sat down on one of the seats. He got in on the other side of me. "I can't believe I'm stuck with you. Everyone else is probably just lying on the bank and getting some sun. You're making me get into this death trap and float up the river. You will be rewarded with better health and skill." He said this with a shy smile, and his neck turned red with embarrassment until it reached the tips of his ears. "I'd rather get a golden tan." He picked up the oar and gave me one as we rowed up the river. It hurt my arm a little at first, but thanks to his strength, we were able to move at a decent speed. Mason." He turned to me, looking calm and relaxed. His dark blonde hair blew in the wind, and in the sun, his eyes looked almost golden. "Shouldn't the water be outside the boat?" I asked as I splashed in the puddle that was getting bigger around my feet. He looked down at the floor, and all of a sudden he wasn't so carefree anymore. "Shit," he said quietly, looking around for the source of the hole. As more and more water filled the raft, I could feel it sinking deeper and deeper into the water. The force of the water then pushed the boat over, tipping us all the way into the lake. I came up and coughed out the water that had gotten into my lungs. Mason asked, looking as serious as ever, "Are you okay?" I nodded and held on to a rock so I wouldn't be swept away. "We'll have to swim with the current, there's a cave up ahead. Someone will come looking for us sooner or later." It was looking really nice to lay out in the sun on the riverbank right now. We got to the cave quickly, and the swim wasn't too hard because we were going with the current instead of against it. I climbed up on the rocky bank and took off my wet, cold clothes. I laid them out in the sun to dry. He stood there awkwardly, not knowing where to look. "There is room for yours," I said. "I can't take my clothes off in front of you." I rolled my eyes at how shy he was. "Mason, we've really showered together." He took off his boots and t-shirt and put them out in the sun. "Not by choice, and I'm on duty." He sat down on the floor and leaned against a big rock to try to get the water out of his army trousers. "Where did you get that?" He ran his thumb over a scar just above my ankle. I took my foot away. Please don't look at my body. It makes me feel bad about myself. His eyebrows shot up and a smile spread across his face. He asked, "You feel bad about your body? Is that really so hard to believe?" I raised one eyebrow, daring him to answer carefully. Yes. I've seen you more times than I've seen myself." I started laughing at how much he was overdoing it. "I don't," I said in my defense. "I didn't know you took my shower. I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't drunk the other day. And now?" He moved his fingers over my body. "Now I'm wet." "I kept my pants on," I said, pulling at the waistband of my pants. He looked at the entrance to the cave and asked, "How long do you think it will be before someone finds us?" "Could take a while. Boot camp doesn't end until 5. I sighed and took the hair tie out of my hair to let the wet strands fall free. "Can't you just get on your walkie-talkie thing?" I pointed to his pants, where he usually kept it. I didn't know if it would work after being in water, but it was worth a shot. But there was nothing in the slot, which made me look confused. "I left it on the bank," he said in a casual way. I asked slowly, "You left it on the bank?" My lips curled at the edges. "Well, I set it down and forgot to pick it back up before getting into the raft." I bit my lip to keep from smiling too much. This was on purpose. I stood up, walked over to him, and sat down on his lap. His eyes moved around my face, and they stayed on my lips longer than usual. "What are you?" he started to say, but I kissed him softly on the lips, feeling the soft warmth of his two beautiful pink pillows. He sat perfectly still, not moving his lips or trying to kiss me back. I pulled back to look at him. "I don't get it," I said. "You planned all of this, me not having a partner, the boat sinking at the exact time and place that the current would bring us to this cave, and you forgetting your walkie-talkie so you couldn't call for help. You wanted us to be alone, why else would you want to?" Riley, I got off of him and moved to the other side of the cave. "I can't," he said in a sad voice. "Then why?" He stood up, and his trousers were dripping water all over the floor. He said, "I don't know why," and I sighed and sat down on a rock nearby. "I just like you," he said quietly, looking like he was confused about what he was saying. "I like talking to you and being around you. I made a mistake. It won't happen again," he said, as if he was explaining it to himself and not me. And then I couldn't stop thinking about how lonely Mason was. I asked quietly, "You don't have any other friends?" He shook his head. "Do you not talk to any of the other high-ranking officers?" He shook his head again and ran his index finger over his stubble. He said, "You can't be their friend and their boss at the same time." "But I can't be your friend and your lieutenant at the same time, so I messed up. I'm sorry. You didn't have to do all of this to hang out with me. You could have just asked me." He smiled nervously at me. "Don't you get it? I'm not allowed to spend time with you, Riley. I'm supposed to give you orders and deal with your punishments. I'm supposed to train you to be a soldier. I'm not allowed to be distracted or show human emotions." I took an oath. "The commander sees it this way. I'm up here," he said, holding his hand above his head, and you're down there. He lowered his hand to just below his knees. You're a criminal because you held up a store at gunpoint. You've broken the rules over and over since you got here. Why would I want to be friends with someone like that? Nobody is asking you to be, I said, crossing my arms over my chest in defiance. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, he said as he walked over to me. Maybe I did, he added. No, he said to himself. I don't know why I would want to be friends with someone like that, but I do. I really do. That's not much better, I said coldly, and he looked down. But it's a start, I said. I lay on my back and looked up at the concrete roof. Mason had gotten a fire going, and things weren't going well between us. We haven't talked much in the last half hour. So you know everything about me, huh? Tell me something about yourself. I finally got the guts to start talking. He turned his head away from the flames, which had been mesmerizing him, and I rolled onto my side, using my elbow to support myself. He said in a straight voice, I can't talk about my private life. I let out a loud, angry grumble. I sat up, crossed my legs, and moved closer to the fire. What was it like to have the commander as your dad? A brief flash of emotion crossed his face, but then the soldier in him came back out. He straightened up, tensed his shoulders, and looked away. Riley, he said in a stern voice. Is it really that bad to let me in? We're stuck in a cave in the middle of nowhere, and no one else is here. Who will know what we talk about? I got up and walked to the cave entrance, looking up and down the river for a boat to rescue me. I couldn't see one, so I just felt my clothes to see if they were dry. I put on my t-shirt and went back to my spot in front of the fire. It was hard, he said, taking a break for effect or to get the courage to keep going. I was born here, into this. My mum was a medic and my dad was a private. He worked his way up the ranks over the years and by the time I was born he was the lieutenant. I nodded along and listened closely to what he had to say. He clearly loved his mother very much because I could see the passion in his eyes when he talked about her. My mum didn't like how he treated me. She wanted me to go to school and hang out with kids my own age. She didn't want me to train. But she got sick and died when I was 5, so my dad had to make all the choices on his own. I apologize, I said softly. I never went to school. I lived at the camp and never left it. They treated me like a criminal here, like one of the soldiers. I trained on the assault course for 12 hours a day, starting when I was 5. It was hard for me as a kid because there were no toys, games, or kids my age here. I was raised in the military, and I think my dad forgot that I didn't actually do anything wrong. I ate slop, just like everyone else. I couldn't leave, I couldn't live in the staff quarters, and I couldn't use the hot showers. I got in trouble, and he was really hard on me. He might have been even harder on him than on anyone else. That's awful, I said. He shrugged. He said, it's all I knew. When I turned 16, I was a major, and it was the first time we started getting recruits my age. I couldn't hang out with them or make friends because I was now a rank. Not that they wanted to. They saw me as an officer whose job it was to keep them on the straight and narrow. They made my life hell, and I couldn't get away from them because I had to eat, sleep, and shower with them. I stayed professional and gave them punishments and discipline, which made them hate me even more. But I wanted to make my father proud. The more he treated me like a criminal, the more I wanted to show him I wasn't one. But to this day, nothing I do is enough. It sounds like your life has been very lonely, Mason. The staff here didn't accept you, they thought you were a criminal. The criminals only saw you as staff. Yeah, I guess. Who did you trust? He shuffled around awkwardly and didn't say anything. Where was your help? Be quiet. Did you have any friends at all? I'm not here for that. When I turned 20, I became a lieutenant. When my father retires, I will be in charge. I can't have friends. But do you want to take over, or do you have to? I asked gently, and he paused for a few quiet minutes to think about everything before he answered. It's hard to say. I don't know anything else. This is what I was meant to do, and it's who I am. I can't picture living any other way. Like my father and his father before him, I was born into the military. I will die in the military, but the difference is that I won't have any kids along the way. I will be the last one in the cycle. I'm sorry you don't think you're good enough for your dad, but I can tell you from experience that you are. You don't talk to people, you're good at giving orders, and don't get me started on the punishments. He smiled proudly, but his eyes didn't show it. My dad is hard to make happy. I mean, look at me now, I'm talking to you. Letting you see me, call me by my first name, and ignore my orders. You're right, Dad. I am busy with my job. You can let someone in. I just wish you would open up completely. He smiled at me. I lay on my back and looked at the ceiling again. We had some quiet time together. I threw a ball of socks into the air and caught it, and he poked the fire. So you didn't promise not to trap the recruits? He laughed and showed me his perfect teeth. Riley, he said in a warning tone. Come on, what else do we need to do here besides talk? I got on my knees and moved around. You ask me questions, I ask you questions, and our answers get lost in this echoey cave. Deal. He thought about it for a while and then sighed. When I became a lieutenant, I had to swear that I wouldn't have any kind of relationship with any of the recruits. I put my hand on a Bible and swore. Do you believe in God? I asked. No, he said, as if he was questioning his own choices. But that's not the point. It's not right for me to get involved with the recruits. So you just have random one-night stands with people you meet at the bar? Not really, he said, making a face that showed he wasn't sure. I shared a bunker with 7 other guys when I was a teenager, so I had to learn a lot of self-control. Now I just hold it back. Suppress the feeling of being turned on. We shouldn't be talking about this because these questions are very personal. Wait, so you've never been with any of the new people? Like in secret? No, Riley, never. I can't show them my face one day and then make them run track the next. It just wouldn't work. He laughed and dismissed the craziness right away. I laughed too, because the words on his lips sounded so strange. Lieutenant, do you have an ugly face? I was joking. I can honestly say I've never seen it, but I can't imagine it looks good. Right now, show me. What? No. You're so weird. He laughed. Go on, you coward. I'll show you mine. Watch. I squinted my eyes and crinkled my eyebrows, biting my lip and letting out a small moan from the back of my throat. He stopped smiling right away and looked at my face with great interest, his eyes full of desire. Now you, I said, and then I laughed again. Riley, I can't do that. The fire's light made his cheeks turn pink. Go on, I said as I poked him. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then let it out without opening his mouth. He still made a noise with the back of his throat that you couldn't hear. I laughed out loud. Good thing you're not a woman, you could never get away with faking it. You often pretend. He asked, and then his eyes grew wide with fear as he realized what he had said. I'm sorry, don't answer that. That was a bad question. I've been with a lot of men who didn't have a clue what they were doing. I believe that every woman has learned how to fake it over time. Oh. He went back to poking the fire in an awkward way. We heard a boat's horn not too far away, and we both got up and ran to the door. Stay inside and get dressed, he said, putting on his wet t-shirt. He left the cave and waved his hands in the distance as he threw me my trousers. He pushed me back when I tried to follow him. Put on some clothes before you come out here. They'll see. Does it really matter? I could just tell them they were wet, I said to myself as I stepped into the wet trousers. He looked at me for a second, frowned, and then looked back at the boat. As I zipped up the crotch, he said, You don't want those pervs looking at your panties. The boat dropped anchor next to the cave, and I could see Mason's posture change right in front of me. The carefree, relaxed attitude was gone. The lieutenant had returned. I can't believe you brought magazines here instead of clothes or food. I lay on Jake's bed and flipped through his magazines while he sat down next to me and looked down at the page. I have a whole stash, my roommates and I trade them off. I turned to look at him and made my best what the heck face. How do you do it when there are a lot of people around? I asked, remembering my earlier conversation with Mason. I don't. We have to go to the toilet to do it. It's not very nice. I know how to have a quiet one in the middle of the night, but it's not easy and I can't really get my magazines out. So we mostly just go to the toilet. She's my favorite, he said, pointing to the middle page spread. Spread was the right word to describe the picture. I made a joke and said, She looks mad. He lay down next to me, squeezing into his single bed while I flipped through more pages of women. I took my time reading the short paragraphs and descriptions on each page. We looked up when the door opened, thinking that one of Jake's roommates had come back from the cafeteria earlier than expected. But when a general walked in, we were both shocked into silence. He looked around the room until he found us, and then a dangerous look crossed his face. At first, neither of us did anything, but after a few minutes, Jake jumped to his feet and stood at attention. What's going on here? He asked coldly. I sat up in Jake's bed and looked at the general, then at Jake, and finally at the P** that was lying out in the open. Rivers, when I walk into the room, you stand up straight. he yelled angrily. I got up and stood at attention. Can I talk to you, General Sir? Jake asked. Permission granted. The general walked over to him and stood right in front of his face. I'm sorry, General Sir, but your visit is very unexpected. He looked at me and then back at Jake. Yes, I can see that, he said with a sneer. You know that male and female recruits can't mix in private quarters. I rolled my eyes and waited for him to give me more laps or go cry to Mason. Did you just roll your eyes at me, Rivers? Shit. I said, no, sir. I kept my eyes completely still, even though I wanted to roll them again. This is Black Pigeon calling for Red Dog, he said over the walkie-talkie. I turned to look at him, but his eyes stayed on Jake's. The general sounded arrogant, like he was on a serious power trip. This is Red Dog answering Black Pigeon's call. I knew right away that it was Mason's voice. Lieutenant Sir, I am asking you to write a disciplinary for Rivers. What? A punishment? That is so messed up. This is my second one, and what for? Are you trying to get me to leave? Jake slowly turned to look at me, his mouth wide open. Eyes to the front, soldier, the general yelled, making Jake look away. I was furious, and my whole body was pumping blood around with anger and shame. I can hear her. What has she done in general? Mason didn't seem happy. I could picture his disapproving look as clearly as day, since I've memorized it so well. Caught her alone in Shed 30 with Jake. He looked down and said, their position was compromisable. After that, she started to backtalk. There was a buzz from the radio around us, but Mason didn't try to respond. Sir? The general asked, looking at the walkie-talkie to see if the connection was still there. I'll write it down, he said quietly. General, you have my permission to punish them however you see fit. The general gave us a wicked grin and put his walkie-talkie back in his pants. Tomorrow, Rivers. He said the words slowly, promising death. You have to do 10 extra laps of the assault course, 20 extra laps of the track, and then finish the day with 100 push-ups. I can't wait to see you in pain. Now get out of here. If I catch you two mixing again, I won't think twice about sending you away. I waited until it was dark to clean up the mess I made with the general. He was a hairy, upper-lipped jerk who let the power go to his head, and I was really angry. I stomped through the staff quarters a little harder than usual and yanked open his door as if I were trying to take it off the hinges. He was sitting on the couch with his legs up, eating from a noodle box and other food boxes that were scattered around. He stopped using his chopsticks and looked up from his food, rolling his eyes. I had no choice, Riley. He said this without swallowing his dinner. Who does he think he is, that slimy little weasel? I threw my arms around to make my points clear and almost yelled at him. Mason kept eating and watching TV. Are you paying attention to me? I yelled. It's hard not to hear you, he said in a bored, dry voice before shoving a dumpling into his mouth. You gave me a punishment. Another one. Can you calm down? You're not going to be sent away. I won't let that happen, but you need to be good. I can't help you when you're clearly doing something wrong. I pushed his feet out of the way and sat down on his couch, looking at the Chinese takeaway box he was holding with love. He sighed and gave me the box before picking up another one. "What are we going to watch?" George Clooney was on the TV when I looked at it. "We're not watching anything. I am watching Ocean's 11. I put my bare legs over his and lay down next to him, making sure to try all of his food. He held my legs without thinking, and every time he moved his hand to get more food, I would feel a cold spot where his hand had just been. He always put it back in the same spot. "What's going on between you and Jake?" he asked after thinking about it for a long time. Even when I turned to look at him, he kept his eyes on the TV. "Nothing," I said simply. "The general said you were in a bad spot." He still wouldn't look at me. "Yeah, well, general talks." I could feel myself getting angry again. "You can't have relationships with the other recruits, it's against the rules. They'll move one of you." I put a chicken ball in my mouth and chewed on it to get rid of my anger. "Okay, I know you won't tell me because I'm the lieutenant and you don't want to get in trouble, but I hope you would because I grabbed his face and made him look at me. Your general is a perv who has to make up fantasies about us because he can't get any." "Rivers, don't talk about my generals like that." "Well, it's true. Nothing is going on. We were just lying on his bed and reading a magazine." His eyes lit up and he looked down at my lips. "Good," he said suddenly, and I let go of his face. "Okay. Yeah, because it's off limits and I don't want to keep covering for you. So get your act together." I snuggled up to him, and to my surprise, he put his arm around my shoulder to protect me. It felt nice, warm, and safe. I finished his noodles and kept watching Ocean's 11 while lying against his chest in a comfortable silence, listening to his calm breathing. He was a different person here than he was on the pitch, and I smiled to myself because I was the only one who got to see him so calm and relaxed. I was hot and comfortable, and I could feel myself smiling. I slowly opened my heavy eyelids and blinked at what was around me. Mason slept next to me, and his long eyelashes fluttered as he dreamed. I poked his cheek, and he made a cute pout, so I poked it again, and he slapped himself and opened his eyes wide. "Ow," he said, looking at me like I was the one who hit him. "I am in your bed," I said, which was clear. "SHH, the alarm hasn't gone off." He turned me over and put his arm around me, pulling my body close to his. I couldn't help but smile as I closed my eyes. There was a knock at his door, and I could tell that his whole body froze. He took his arm off and sat up. I rolled over to face him, and he gave me a worried look. He put his thin finger over his lips to shush me, then he took my hand and pulled me out of bed, dragging me to the door without saying a word. I was shivering from the cold because I was only wearing grey sweat shorts and a t-shirt from the night before. He opened the door after putting me behind it. "Sir, Commander?" Mason asked. I didn't say anything, but my heart was pounding. He even calls his dad sir when they are alone. "Come here for a progress report on your recruits." His voice was harsh and scary, and it made my blood run cold. "Right now, sir?" I could hear Mason's voice shaking, I could almost hear the fear. "We're halfway through the fitness test." "Are they ready for it?" his father asked in a stern, professional voice. "I think most of them are, Mason said. Most, he yelled angrily, and even though I was behind the door, it made me flinch. If I were in charge of this field, they would all be ready to do it 3 times without complaining. This just won't work. Pay attention to the stronger ones. We're going to take the weaker ones to the judge. They aren't going to make fun of my boot camp just because the lieutenant is a loser. Sir, I have hundreds of recruits under my care, and no one has given me a good enough reason to send them away. I would have to follow the rules and go through 3 disciplinary actions. Then you make them act up, which gives us a reason to take them away. Wow, that's pretty mean. Excuse me, Commander, but some of the new recruits have young kids or sick family members. Boot camp may not be complete freedom, but they can call their family whenever they want, choose their own lawyers, and meet with them whenever they want. For some of the new recruits, boot camp is a better mental fit. Are you asking me to put them in a tough spot and make the least fit of them act up enough to get in trouble? I'm happy you finally figured out how to do things around here, Mason. It took you a long time. Do you want me to lead in a dishonest way? The commander got closer, and Mason's grip on the door got stronger, stopping it from being pushed open. Don't make our boot camp look bad, I'm telling you. I'm telling you not to make your leaders look bad. My boy. You don't want to do that because it will make me look bad. He said what he was going to do. Got it? Yes, sir, Mason said quietly. I heard his father tut loudly. I know we're all criminals, but at least at boot camp we can meet the generals. We can sneak out and go to the pub. It was the better deal, and Mason was smart enough to know that, but it looks like making his father happy was still the most important thing for him. Mason, you are a disgrace. Get your uniform on and comb your hair. I can see that your bed isn't made either. Don't be late to the pitch. Let's see if you can do something right and set an example. Sir? Yes, sir. Mason slammed the door shut and went to the fridge. He took out a bottle of water and sipped it without saying anything about what had just happened. I watched him closely. He wiped his mouth and put the lid back on the bottle. Finally, he said, I think you should go. I took a second to think about what I wanted to do and then I did it. Come on. I took his hand and led him back to bed. I climbed in with him and pulled him with me. Then I threw the covers over us both and snuggled into him. We're not going to let him ruin our morning. He relaxed in just a few seconds, and then he completely melted into me. Then, to our surprise, he brought my hand to his lips and kissed the back of it softly. His body stopped moving. I don't know. I didn't. I don't know why I just did that, he said, stuttering and looking a little embarrassed. Stop thinking too much, I said. For 15 minutes, we lay in each other's arms in pure bliss before the alarm went off and we had to get up and start the day. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.